A very warm welcome again to Cape Town and to the Parliament of South Africa. We trust that you will be enjoying your stay with us and enjoying the next 3 days of the program. Just to indicate that I'm the head of the research services in Parliament. Thank you. Colleagues, on the program this morning we have the opening address will be done by the Secretary to Parliament, Mr. Kingezi Mgidlana. We also have on the program Mr. Albert Ntunja, the Chief Librarian in the Library of Parliament. And then we have Ms. Raisa Theodori, who is the chair of the section doing a presentation. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our Secretary, Mr. Mgidlana, to the podium to come and do the opening address. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to South Africa. I feel a bit jealous that I won't be with you for the entire session because I've been looking at your program. It's a very interesting program. It's very timely, and it covers key important issues globally and, of course, for the region. I think when one looks at your program, you are dealing with issues of development, transformation, and basically trying to say how does library and research fit into that particular space. We think that topic is very timely because for the world, we are currently dealing with your Sustainable Development Goals. You would know that we have been basically dealing with the Millennium Development Goals that are coming to an end in 2015. And there have been discussions that have ensued over the last 2 to 3 years trying to frame the Sustainable Development Goals for the world going forward. And in there, putting the whole issue of development at the center. We think it's also very important given the fact that many of the countries have come through into the fray, entering that space of being developing countries. And there are a number of strides that have been made over the last 15 years. You will have to check, I think, the report that was produced by the Secretary General of the UN. They have been producing those reports on an annual basis and on a 5-yearly basis, indicating progress that has been made over time globally. We think for us as a continent also it's extremely important, given the fact that we are emerging from a very rough past of underdevelopment, colonialism, burden of disease, hopelessness, into a space now where the continent is really dealing with issues of development and placing them at the center of the work that we do in this regard. And as testimony to that, the AU has adopted Agenda 2063, which is a framework looking into the next 50 years of our union as the African region to say how do we address those key fundamental challenges of development. What is also important and encouraging, looking at the continent once again, is the fact that you would know that the continent is divided into mainly about 5 AU regions. And within those, we have a number of what we call regional economic communities who have developed their long-term plans in this regard. You have ECOWAS having its long-term plan, you have SADC having its long-term plan, COMESA and so forth. So there's basically that mood that is waving through this particular continent that places issues of development at the center and saying states and governments basically are going to focus on the issues of development. So it becomes really a very important issue that we have chosen this particular topic. I know it's coincidental for yourself, but for us it's very timely because it's going to assist us to unpack some of these issues. Now, some of the developments that have happened in the continent, you would recall that at the turn of the century, there were two fundamental decisions that were taken by the African continent. The first one was to transform the OAU into the African Union, and thereby placing development at the center. And the second one was to adopt a program called the New Partnerships for Africa's Development, which is NEPAD, a program that we have been implementing since 2000, taking us to where we are. And that has been critical for us in helping us to shape our thinking, in helping us to deal with issues of governance. You would know that we have a unique system that we have adopted as a continent called the African Review Mechanism, where heads of states sit amongst themselves, review each other, look at a broad spectrum of issues around governance, economic development, social transformation, democracy, rule of law, and so forth, and give each other feedback in that regard. And it's a mechanism that we think as a continent has worked relatively well in this regard. So this era for us really heralds, a new way of doing business. And it's shown by some of the progress that we have seen in the continent across all the various spectrums, whether you're looking at issues of governance, looking at the issues of your economic development and social transformation in that regard. Now, these set of circumstances really have placed before us a number of demands that have come through from the masses of our people across the board. And they've really challenged us as states and governments, and in particular, parliaments, right? Answering that question, what is the role of parliaments in that particular space when we are dealing with issues of development? Now, that question is a true question, whether you're looking at issues that are global in nature, around your sustainable development goals, or you're looking at matters at a regional level, if you use the UN language, in our various regions, and the sub-regional level. What is the role of parliaments in that space of dealing with development? And that discourse has, for us, made us to ask many questions. Many questions that we don't have answers for that, and we are hoping people such as yourselves who are engulfed in this particular work will help us to untangle these issues. And of course, as we are dealing with it, you will also from your side, based on the exchanges that you will be having as colleagues from different parliaments, different countries, different continents, you'll be sharing experiences that will then take the rest of us to the next level. Because we want to answer that particular question on what is the role of Parliament in this discourse of development as a representative structure, as representative bodies, as bodies that represent the people out there. And that question begs another one. I mean, once you answer that very question, it's what is the type of support that we think should be provided to a member who is operating in that kind of a space, right? And the space that we were in before, and I mean, parliaments have different characters, constitutions, and permutations, and so forth. But in there, what is common to all of us is that there are expectations from people who have voted those members into those particular legislative bodies. The expectations of transformation happening on the ground, the expectations of development taking place, and the expectations which are centered around Parliament as representative bodies. So asking and answering that particular question on what is our role in that particular kind of space becomes very crucial and very important. Parallel to that, I mean, we have to ask questions whether we have sufficient enough understanding of the issues on the ground, right? If we are talking about development, what is it that we are talking about in that particular space? Where are the issues and so forth? Do we have sufficient capacity? In fact, do we have the data that is required for us to even make the necessary assessments, to have the necessary analytical skills within Parliament to analyze those problems properly so that when we come up with proposed solutions that we feed through to members, those proposals will be based really on data that we have analyzed, or, you know, are we going to do what we have been doing over time, which is receive documents from the government, turn it this way and that way, you know, take it to the member and so forth. And I think if we are really looking at those issues, because the issues are really about trying to make change, right? The issues are about trying to transform societies. The issues are about trying to make sure that there's development on the ground. So if parliaments are going to be in that space, what really does it mean for parliaments? Or if you put it differently, if there is no development, would it be proper and fair to blame Parliament, right? Because in this space, and talking amongst ourselves, sometimes we can be very happy to say, no, that problem is not our problem, right? It's the problem of the executive, it's the problem of members, it's the problem of, you know, many other variables that are there, or stakeholders, key stakeholders that are there. But if we are dealing with issues of information, dealing with issues of turning that information into knowledge, asserting ourselves as you are doing so in this particular theme that says we want to get engaged in development, right? We want to get engaged in transformation, meaning we want to move society from this point to that point. What does that mean for us as Parliament? And much more pointedly, what does it mean for us as the people who are supporting the members who are doing this particular job, right? And how do we do that function? How do we perform it? What kind of partnerships do we put in place in order to make sure that we have our own capacity and capability to do the appropriate analysis that is required? We have our own capacity to analyze, you know, the policy issues that are there, and clearly say, these are the issues that are there, right? As opposed to just engaging with the executive on the basis of what has been proposed, which is also their right to do so. But we also have a legitimate space to work around issues of lawmaking, which in other forms is around issues of engaging in policy. So for us to do that, we have got to have the appropriate capacity to do that kind of analysis, and to propose you know, viable options in that regard. We have to ask a question, you know, I think from our side we have sort of said, I mean, in trying to answer that question of what is the kind of role that we should play in this regard. And for those of us who are operating in this developing space, we have said, you want parliaments to act as agents of change, right? You want parliaments to act as agents of change and agents of transformation. But what would that mean if you were saying a parliament would act as an agent of change and an agent of transformation, right? It comes back to the earlier questions that I was raising. Firstly, we understand what the issues are, right? We have properly diagnosed them. We have the appropriate data that we have developed on our side. We have the proper mechanisms and tools, and we have the proper products to produce that would enable the members to perform their functions in a much more meaningful way. So that issue of engaging, of parliaments being seen as agents of change and transformation becomes very key and important in fostering development. If we look at the theme of this particular conference, I think from our side, one of the things probably we want to raise with you, and which we hope you can then be in a position to grapple with and deal with, because the type of business that we deal with, in essence, as you would know, Parliament don't produce, houses, clinics, and all of that, which are those nice, tangible things. You said you will build 100 houses there, the 100 houses are there, you will build the clinics there, the clinics are there. We produce, goods and services that are intangible. And the goods and services that are intangible, you are the beginning of that process, right? You are the beginning of that process because we're in a knowledge space, right? That is the nature of our business. That's what we sell. If we were selling any particular product, it's a product that is related to knowledge, right? So dealing with that space and really tackling it becomes very important, right? So that we understand ourselves as the people who are engaged in, collecting the information, collating it, analyzing it, making sure that that information is put in a particular fashion that generates various information sets of knowledge, and so forth, becomes absolutely crucial. And how that information is linked to the various stakeholders on the ground, right? Because we have a number of organizations in our various countries and in our various continents. We have regional bodies, we have sub-regional bodies who are working on a number of issues. We have various information sets that can either verify some of the things that we say, on an objective basis because they are there on the ground, or they can even bring up issues that are there. So the key question is really whether, as the research and the library people, or the library and the research people, we will do our work the way we have been doing it in the past. And my submission to yourself is that our work is changing, right? The way we're doing business is changing. The world is changing, Your conference theme is very spot on in saying the key issue across the board, it's development and transformation. So if you are in that space of development and transformation, what is it that we need to do in order to make sure that we capacitate, the members out there, or in fact, in your case, we are capacitating even the staff who are working in these various areas, right, who are supporting the members. We have to capacitate the members, and we have to interact with these various stakeholders out there so that we engage with these issues in a very dynamic sense. And I'm very hopeful that is on my side, having looked at your program. That's why I was a bit jealous that I won't be with you for quite some time, that you have identified a number of very good topics that really have the good potential to deal with these issues in a very, very meaningful manner and take parliaments across the board to the next level. Because when we engage in this space next time of saying, let's review the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the things that we must be saying is let's review what we have done in order to contribute to the achievement of those goals, right? One of the things that we need to be saying at various regional structures, right? We need to be saying, what have we done in our regional bodies in order to contribute to that particular goal? right? At the sub-regional level, we need to be saying, what is it that has been done through our own initiatives and actions, right? To change the situation, to transform the situation, to make sure that this ideal of having development at the center is real, it's realized, and we're able to work together with our colleagues and our counterparts in the executive in this regard as equal partners, right? As equal partners who are participating in this process because we have a particular role to play. They also have a particular role to play in this regard. So I'd like to really, without taking too much of your time, thank you very much for inviting me, and hope that you have, very good deliberations over the next few days. And please do take time and to check out our beautiful Cape Town. It's got lots to offer. So I hope you want to work, and then go home. You will work, and check out a bit of Cape Town and improve our economy and go home. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary. We appreciate your opening words to the delegation. I think that, Secretary, while you will not be here with us for the rest of the day, we have the technology available that Secretary will be watching the discussions in his office while we engage and continue here. I think that Mr. Mngidlana's address has really also posed a number of challenges for us as we go forward. So as we engage in the next 2 days around issues, around the theme of transformation and change and development, we need to ask and answer the questions that Secretary has put forward. Do we have the capacity in our different parliaments? Do our staff have the capacity? Do we have the necessary skills to be able to empower our members and make a positive contribution? And are we effective in the support that we are also offering? But as Secretary has said, I think that those are the kinds of debates that we will hear and the experiences that we will gain from the different presentations over the next 2 days. So, Secretary, thank you very much once again for your presentation and your opening address. And we will certainly, by the end of the 3 days, I'm sure, from the conference organizers as well, we will be putting a report together so that we can also look at whether we've answered some of the things, the challenge that you have put forward for us today. So thank you once again. Secretary will excuse you if you need to be excused now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues and delegates. Could I now welcome Mr. Albert Ntunja to the podium? Mr. Ntunja is the Chief Librarian of the Parliamentary Information Centre. So thank you, Mr. Ntunja.
Is this his permit? Just check if it is.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Carmen has already said that warm welcome. Unfortunately, it's cold today. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you this morning to the 31st IFLA Pre-Conference for Research and Library Services in Parliaments. The activities of the session started on Monday with a capacity development program. Today it is the start of the pre-conference and will end tomorrow. And on Friday will be the workshop for researchers that will take place at the waterfront from 8:30 to 12:30. The pre-conference will focus on the theme development, transformation, and cooperation in libraries and research services in parliaments. It intends to explore how libraries and research services evolve and innovate in responding to the information needs of parliaments. We hope that you will find the pre-conference both enjoyable and valuable. Thank you for coming. It is great to see so many of you attending the pre-conference. The organizing committee and the section members have been working very hard in trying to get this pre-conference going. We appreciate your contribution. We say thank you very much. I have few announcements to make. There will be no revolving microphones. You can use the microphones in front of you. The ablution facilities are on the right-hand side as you're facing that direction. Lunch will be held at the back here. Just ensure that you are registered for the right tour on Friday. The Robben Island tour starts at 1. You must be there by 1:15, the latest. The tour to Table Mountain starts at 2. You've got to be at the Mandela Gateway on Friday by at least 2:15. For those that are attending the workshop, they will already be there. We will end the workshop at about 12:30. Those that are not attending the workshop but are going to the tours, be there by 2:15. That's it for me so far. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ntunja, for your welcoming words. I'm glad to see that there will be some tours on the program, so at least you'll be fulfilling some of the sightseeing requests that Secretary also put out to you. It is my honor now to introduce and welcome Ms. Raisa Theodori to the podium. Ms. Theodori is the chair of the section, and she'll be doing the introduction to this particular session. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Albert. Dear colleagues and friends, at the outset, I would like to express, on behalf of IFLA and of the Section of Library and Research Services for Parliaments, our most sincere thanks to the Parliament of South Africa for hosting the Section's 31st Annual Pre-Conference and for welcoming us so warmly yesterday evening and at this opening session today. The motivating words of Secretary Mgidlana, together with the remarks of Mr. Ntunja, will be an inspiring source for our deliberations throughout the conference. I take this opportunity to also express my gratitude, sincere gratitude, to all those who have worked behind the scenes, both in Parliament and in the section, to make this event possible by putting tireless hours of work and a lot of energy in its organization and by providing quality inputs for its program of activities. Their success can be measured by the presence of so many of you here today coming from around the world, from countries of different culture and traditions, but all sharing common ideals of librarianship and research as essential services to representative institutions and to legislators. I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the presence of IFLA President-elect, Ms. Donna Schieder, who was with us yesterday and will be with us today, and she will take the floor in today's concluding session. We are grateful to her for accepting our invitation to spend her valuable time with former colleagues of the section, and we look forward to working with her during her tenure, which will start in a few days here in South Africa. Dear colleagues, the section on library and research services for parliaments has developed in the last decade a strong capacity to act as a platform for library and research services to collaborate and learn from each other how to become stronger and capable to better support their institution, innovate services to improve the way they respond to the needs of the parliament, and thus make the difference. Coming together as a section, committing time and energy, joining forces, librarians and researchers have built their collective knowledge to develop projects and carry out activities to improve skills and understanding of the scope and methods of our work, identify challenges and priorities and way in which to address them. The first and most important outcome of our work is the annual pre-conference and the participation to the Congress activities. These events provide every day an excellent opportunity, every year an excellent opportunity for librarians and researchers from around the world to meet, network with peers, share knowledge and ideas, promote long-lasting working relationship, I think we all witnessed this, and develop new skills, provide advice and assistance to those who are facing emerging challenges. The 31st pre-conference that we are now opening is the culmination of a year of hard work for many members of the section who committed time and knowledge in supporting the section goals. We have ahead a number of intensive working days at the pre-conference, and for those who will have the chance to attend the Congress as well next week here in Cape Town, next Sunday. I am happy to report that we were able to plan a rich set of activities this year too, different in content and format, capable of raising interest of a wide and diversified audience through workshops, conference sessions, working in smaller groups, training events, and our aim is to ensure that every parliamentary librarian or researcher, no matter the country of nationality, institutional context, and background, could find a reason of interest and something to learn and something to share. The theme of our event, you've heard this a lot this morning and you know this, is development, transformation, cooperation in library and research services for parliaments, in parliaments. With these keywords, it will be the framework for our program and for the deliberations of these days of work. The presentation and discussions that we will hear will reflect the importance of these keywords and concepts, development, transformation, and cooperation, when we think about the future of our libraries, research, and information services. Today, we will have the opportunity to hear and learn about the achievements made by the Parliament of South Africa and its Parliamentary Information Center in managing, preserving, and delivering knowledge and information. As Donna mentioned yesterday evening, the Parliament of South Africa is hosting today its second annual pre-conference of the section, the first being the 23rd conference back in 2007. And it will be extremely interesting, I think, to observe the developments and innovations put in place in the past 8 years. We also will have a chance today to learn more on developments in networking and cooperation in the African region, among Anglophone as well as among Francophone countries who are putting a great effort to establish a formal network. I wish them sound success. Regional networks and associations exist or are being established in all continents, and the IFLA section has to commit in supporting their work and further developments. They are complementary to our global network, and they are a fundamental partner for us to achieve our goals. They represent a major opportunity for investigating the concrete needs of parliamentary library research and information services from different regions in the world. An effective cooperation with IFLA, the Association of Parliamentary Libraries of Eastern and Southern Africa, was, for example, put in place on the occasion of this pre-conference for the 2-day capacity building activity that was mentioned by Mr. Ntunja a few minutes ago, and that was held on 10 and 11 August and preceded today's gathering. I count on the fact that the information that was gathered and the documents that were delivered will be shared within the IFLA network to the benefit of those members that were not able to attend. Our IFLA Global Network will do the same. I would also like to mention the fact that by taking place in Africa, this pre-conference sees the attendance of a large number of parliaments from the region, some of which are attending the conference for the first time. I would like to welcome them warmly, together with newcomers from every part of the world, and encourage them to lively participate and provide inputs to our debates, to enrich with their experiences our meetings and deliberations. Tomorrow, as it is our tradition, we will dedicate the second day of the pre-conference to international presentations and papers. To learn more on how parliamentary library, research, and information services from around the world have evolved, are innovating, and widen their mission to respond to the needs of the Parliament, and in many cases, to the public and the external world. The benefit of identifying new models, strategies, and methodologies to meet the needs of users will emerge in these presentations that we will listen to. And concrete examples of how this can happen will encourage not to fear change of nature and role, and to plan for the future with open views. This conversation on these topics will ideally continue next week at the main IFLA Congress at our session on evolving to meet the challenges of the 21st century. During that same week, our learning opportunities will be enriched by the sessions that we will hold in partnership with other IFLA sections that have different professional background, but common interests and knowledge to share. Together with them, we have worked on programs that deal with aspects and themes that are relevant in our profession and for the delivery of our services, such as access to legal information and legislative data, technologies to support access to information, preservation issues, knowledge management, professional development and growth. I encourage those of you who are attending the Congress next week to attend our session and contribute to our programs. The pre-conference tomorrow will also provide an opportunity to hear news and updates about the activities of the Interparliamentary Union, with whom the section has a long-standing partnership. The IPU represents our stakeholders, the decision makers, and the users of our libraries. It is the main channel for us to reach them and to promote our profession. As many of you know, the collaboration with IPU has led during the years also through broader cooperation with other partners, namely the United Nations and the Association of Secretaries General of Parliaments, to deliver joint activities and publications. One result of this partnership are the guidelines for parliamentary research services that, as you will have seen in the program, will be launched and distributed tomorrow. A joint IFLA-IPU publication, the guidelines were developed thanks to the commitment of a working group of section members and experts from around the world, chaired by Ms. Sonia Leroux, that I thank very much for this, following a mandate of the Section Standing Committee to respond to the increasing interest expressed by section members who are wishing to develop or expand their research service. To make the most of this collective work and share at best its content among colleagues, the section will hold a workshop on 14 August, which will close this week of gatherings. I encourage all of you to attend the workshop. While mainly focused on research, it will provide inputs on management and strategic developments that will prove relevant in different contexts as well. Dear colleagues, the days in which we meet and stay together here are an invaluable opportunity to discuss topics that are relevant for our professional growth. But at the same time, these days represent, I think in the thoughts of us all, an occasion to look beyond the specific aspects related to the improvement of our profession and development of skills. And they allow us to discuss the scope of the services we manage and work in and the sense of their mission. It can give us an opportunity to share awareness on international developments and global trends that will necessarily affect our libraries to the extent that they will impact on representative institutions. As mentioned by Secretary Mgidlana a few minutes ago, and to recall his words, let me say that the theme of this pre-conference, development, transformation, and cooperation, could not be more timely. In only a few weeks from now, heads of states and government will converge on the United Nations to agree on a set of transformational, sustainable development goals for the next 15 years. To pursue the aspirations of this new universal post-2015 development agenda, all countries, regardless of their development levels, will be called upon to develop follow-up plans for its implementation at national, local, and regional level. I would like to mention that IFLA itself has played its part in providing views and inputs to member states during the extensive preparation and negotiations that have led to the agreement, which will be sealed in late September in New York, called Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our President-elect, Ms. Donna Schieder, will touch on these issues in her concluding remarks today. Also, during the main Congress on 16 August, IFLA will be hosting an informal meeting to update its members on the developments and results achieved by the Federation in ensuring that access to information was recognized in the post-2015 development agenda, and to discuss the important steps to be undertaken to realize access to information. However, besides IFLA's overall role for the implementation of this agenda, I believe that this section and its members have a particular stake in it, as the parliaments we serve will be playing a key part in its realization. The agenda, which addresses all countries, developed and developing alike, calls to build just and inclusive societies based on transparent, effective, and accountable institutions, and in which responsive, inclusive, participatory, and representative decision-making is ensured at all levels. To these issues, the agenda dedicates Goal 16 and to related targets. At the same time, it explicitly acknowledges as a means of implementation, and I quote from the declaration, the essential role of national parliaments through their enactment of legislation and adoption of budget, and their role in ensuring accountability for the effective implementation of our commitments. The expectations for parliaments will therefore be to improve their own transparency, effectiveness, and accountability, and at the same time, they will inevitably be at the center of the national debate for appropriate lawmaking and the post-2015 accountability exercise. Each parliamentary library and research service, according to its respective roles, of course, can be called to support these processes, and these developments will represent for us, I believe, another reason for working in partnership and building collective knowledge to strengthen our capacity of responding to the needs of our representative institutions. Dear colleagues, I'm coming to an end, but closing my introduction to this conference, I would like to add a personal note. As you may know, at the closure of the 2015 IFLA Congress, my term as section chair and as standing committee member will come to an end. The time spent in the section as standing committee member first and officer in recent years has enriched me very much, professionally and personally. Being a standing committee member represents a great opportunity to contribute from the inside to the work of the section, and these last years have been for me especially rewarding, also thanks to the great cooperation experience with colleagues and friends that shared the same objective of making this a real learning environment for all parliaments involved. I realized a few days ago that all started in South Africa. 8 years ago. This is where I started to be actively engaged in the section's work. I became a standing committee member in South Africa. And this is where I will seize my term as chair. But it will also be where I will start to act as division chair for the Division 1. And I hope we can come back in this beautiful country in 8 years' time to tell each other what has happened in between. I wish all of you all of us, fruitful deliberations and a successful pre-conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Ms. Raisa Theodori for her introduction and setting the scene as well for the next few days. We are glad that South Africa also offers the platform where many good memories are made for you, Ms. Theodori. So thank you very much. In closing, it will be amiss of me if I don't also just acknowledge the presence of Ms. Donna Shida, the President-elect of IFLA. So very welcome, ma'am. We had already acknowledged and heard the Secretary to Parliament. We had already heard Ms. Theodori, who, as we know, is the chair of the section. And the last person on my list is also Ms. Lillian Gassi, who is the secretary of the section. A very warm welcome to you. Colleagues and delegates, we will have a short break for tea, and I think tea will be served at the back. And after we will come back to the second session of this morning. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Nomzamo Noyakaza from the Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, Documentation Section. I'd like to welcome you once again after our welcome and the introduction. I now think that we all feel at home. We'll now call our 4 presenters up for this session. And our first presenter will be Mr. Albert Ndunja.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. The title of my paper is Innovative Library Services for Information and Knowledge-Based Parliament. Case study of the Parliamentary Information Center. The paper is divided into 4 sub-themes. An overview and introduction to the Parliamentary Information Center. You can do it there. The repositioning and rebranding of the Parliamentary Information Center. Technology Enhanced Library Service Project. The 4th theme of the paper is a PowerPoint presentation of the 2 strategic priority areas from the Technology Enhanced Library Project, namely the Integrated Library Management System and the Digital Content Delivery Sub-Projects. And the sub-theme is Digital Platforms and Resources. Let me look at the overview and introduction to the Parliamentary Information Center. Since its inception in 1885, the Library of Parliament has built a huge collection to meet the information needs of members of Parliament. The initial collection was expanded when the mining magnate, Cindy Mendelssohn, donated his Afrikaner collection to the Library of Parliament. The collection was to form the nucleus of the existing collection at that time. A sum of money was also left for the development and maintenance of the collection, and money is currently kept under various investment accounts. In 1927, the collection was again expanded when 15,000 items belonging to the collection of Major William Jardine was purchased by the Library of Parliament. The Legal Deposit Act, which was known as Copyright Act then, gave the Library of Parliament copyright privileges, and as such, it received a copy of all material published in South Africa. The current collection at the library comprises a variety of formats, including e-publications, books and journals, maps, microfilms, photographs, atlases, videos, CDs, slides, online databases, and linked to internet resources. For over a century, the Library of Parliament has continued to provide significant support to the overall functioning of Parliament. In order to succeed in the 21st century, the Library of Parliament needed to exploit the benefits and opportunities of the networked world and embrace new ways of delivering content and reaching out to members of Parliament. The digital revolution has also changed the relationship between the members of Parliament and the library, many of whom do not use the physical library. The Library of Parliament embarked on a dynamic and ongoing process of reinvention, beginning with an intentional effort to design, develop, and implement new ways to serve and connect with members of Parliament. It has, like many other parliamentary libraries in the world, come a long way from being a gentleman's library, that is, a place of leisure, to a vibrant parliamentary information center, with its fingers on the pulse of activities and events taking place in Parliament. It is one of the oldest existing libraries in South Africa and can be traced back to the Parliament of the Cape of Good Hope in 1854. The Cape Legislative Council, that is the Senate, and the Cape Legislative Assembly, that is the National Assembly, met in two separate buildings. This was the first Parliament. This is a historic building where we're sitting currently. As you were coming to Parliament this morning, you passed the Slave Lodge. That was Parliament. That was the Cape Legislative Assembly. Parliament met in these two buildings, and there were two libraries for each of these houses. In 1854, a select committee was appointed to consider the matter of establishment of a library for the Legislative Council. 3 years later, the Legislative Assembly also appointed a committee to consider the establishment of a library for each house. So there were 2 libraries. One was based here, one was based down in Adderley Street. A fortnight later, the committee reported and recommended that there should be a joint library for the use of members of both houses. The Select Committee also recommended that the House of Assembly should acquire a certain number of standard works of reference for its own use. When the new Houses of Parliament were completed in 1885, the collection of the 2 libraries were merged to form a joint library called Library of Parliament. The library is conveniently situated between the 2 houses, the old Assembly building and the Senate building, currently known as the National Council of Provinces. That is the overview where we come from. Let's look at the situation now. The success of any parliament in undertaking the function of passing the laws, scrutinizing the executive functions, and generally holding the government to account is highly dependable upon the effective provision of research, information, and library services. It is widely recognized that information and knowledge are the critical asset for Parliament to succeed. Information and knowledge, therefore, becomes the lifeblood of Parliament, but they are often neglected in favor of material assets. Can you imagine a Parliament without a library or research department? Parliamentary democracy would be impossible under such polity. It's like the human body cannot live without blood. Parliament cannot function without information and knowledge. The availability of information and communication technologies is allowing people everywhere in the world to access reliable and accurate information and knowledge almost instantaneously. In most cases where there are very limited ICT, innovative services and products might not be possible. We've experienced that during the training on Monday and Tuesday. In 2008, the Information Communication Technology Forum in Parliament conducted a survey of the use of technology. Responses and comments were solicited from 105 members of Parliament, and the benefits of ICT in supporting the basic values of transparency, accessibility, effectiveness, and oversight were over-mentioned in that document. The findings also indicated a future vision of the Library of Parliament that is remotely accessible 24 hours, 7 days a week. The library at that time was faced with a particular ongoing challenge in presenting its value in Parliament, primarily because of its traditional role. We recognize that while we needed to break out of the traditional mold, we also needed to deconstruct the perception that the library was just a repository for books and information resources. There was a growing need for the Library of Parliament to evolve and become more dynamic and responsive to the needs of Parliament. talking about innovative library services. The information professionals, librarians, have this ability to adapt to the changing technological environment. In libraries, these innovative efforts tend to evolve around the improvement of services and products. With this in mind, what is called innovative or innovative library services might not be innovative in another library, might be a normal service in your context. The service or product might not be a new idea, but it is implemented in a new context for a new purpose. It is the way in which we integrate the technology to yield greater benefits to the members of parliament and parliamentary staff. The second stage of the transformation was to do with the branding of the library, which removed the term library and replaced it with information. It was important for us to rebrand in order to continuously justify our existence. Dropping the name library was part of moving the library into the 21st century, web-based services. We are in the business of information, and information is more than just books. We were of the opinion that members of parliament and staff will put up with the change of the name if it brings new, improved information in library services. It was not the question of old wines in new bottles. The name of Library of Parliament was also no longer effective in communicating the new priorities and services. The transition from Library of Parliament to Information Center was therefore to reflect the 21st century digital services that were envisaged. Seaton, the head of the Research and Information Services at the Scottish Parliament, made similar comments when she spoke about the Scottish Parliamentary Information Centre experiences. She said, "Those of us who were planning the research and information services made a number of crucial decisions. First of all, we decided not to call it a library. Emphasis was on speed, service, and innovation. We needed a brand. We needed to make an impact, and we needed to capture the imagination." That was the situation with us. The change to Parliamentary Information Centre refers to the emerging model of digital services that emphasize the new technologies and the new knowledge management role we are playing in the division. Now I move to the Technology Enhanced Library Project. The information explosion and the need for members of parliament to be aware of many changes and developments in the local and world affairs demands that the Library of Parliament should constantly seek ways to improve and facilitate the provision and dissemination of information. The Library of Parliament supports Parliament's legislative and oversight functions by providing timeous, high-quality information services that enable members of Parliament to understand problems, consider solutions. But the monumental aspect of the library architecture has limited us in implementing the new technology. the building was not planned with appropriate technological amenities. The Speaker's office made a request to the senior management of Parliament for the transformation of the library into an ultra-modern 21st century information and knowledge hub that will respond to the needs of Parliament. The Library of Parliament launched and implemented a project called Technology Enhanced Library Service, Enhancing Democracy in the Digital Age. The aim of the project is to create a more dynamic and focused library and information service that will keep up with the technological developments. In order to technologically enhance the service and products of the library, the following 6 deliverables were envisaged: integrated library management system, library security system and disaster management sub-project, digital content delivery sub-project, refurbishment of the library bookstores, digitization. The 6th one was capacity development of staff. That will also include change management and organizational development. In conclusion, for over a century, the Parliamentary Information Center has continued to provide significant support to the overall functioning of Parliament as an institution and a democratic process. With this comes the responsibility to always review the information services and to reflect on whether the Parliamentary Information Center is evolving with a new technology. Technology has made it unnecessary to a certain extent for users to visit the library, and we hope we could use the same technology to attract members of Parliament back to the physical Parliamentary Information Center, even if they do not need to come to access the resources and information. A big challenge for us is to communicate to both members of Parliament and senior management how the Parliamentary Information Center, I keep on using the word Library of Parliament and then change to Parliamentary Information Center. That is the problem that we are currently facing, because we've changed from Library of Parliament to Parliamentary Information Center. The challenge now is how do we convince top management in Parliament that we are transforming, we provide better services, given that money was provided to transform into a better library. Should the traditional perceptions persist, there is a danger that the development of new services and products will be put at risk. I quote Cokie Roberts, a political commentator for ABC News, and she said, "Politicians depend on libraries for information and facts. The library of today might be in your cell phone instead of going to the building." I thank you. Mr. Rian Thornton and Betty van Eck will show you some of the strategic priorities that I spoke about earlier. Okay.
Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, we're just getting ready with the next presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ntunja. We will, at the first showing, afterwards, after all the presentations, yes. We will only take questions after all the presentations. We'll now call upon Ingrid Hendrik.
Why is this not coming up?
Are they still showing? Oh, okay.
No, on the screen. Just trying to get this up here. Maybe. Or is it not moving? It's not going to the second screen. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. As Mr. Ntunja indicated, we launched a project called the Digital Enhanced Library Services, and one of the key deliverables of that project was the introduction of a new library management system, as well as bringing in new digital tools and services. Myself, Rian Thornton, I'm the systems librarian, together with my colleague Bertie van Eck. I would say we would probably have been the key role players in making the vision of Mr. Ntunja a reality. And in most cases, he outlined in broad strokes where he wanted to take the library to. And almost 3 years ago, when he introduced the Enhanced Library Services project, many people did not take him seriously. Many people believed it's not possible in the environment in which we work. There were too many obstacles to overcome. But he pursued this vision and he developed a business case all by himself. And he sold the project to Parliament. He got the money for the project. And yet at that stage, he was still looked upon as a dreamer. You've got the money, you've got a business plan. Do you have the staff? Do you have the capabilities to make this a reality? It wasn't an easy task, but we tried to use all the resources at our disposal. And one of the key deliverables we needed to bring into the library was a new library management system. Because previously, we had a library management system that was only accessible. The catalog was only accessible if someone walked in physically to the library and asked for assistance from a librarian at the desk. We did not have a full-fledged online public access terminal. We had computers in the library with links to various resources. But we knew this wasn't the situation we wanted to be in. We needed to change. We've seen the developments internationally. Why can't we do that? So we investigated a new library management system, and we eventually decided on Cersei Dynex's Symphony system. Previously, we had the InMagic DB TextWorks library system. And for many reasons, we did not develop that platform. But we also found shortcomings in that solution, especially with regards to, will it be able to fulfill the expectations, what we wanted to achieve through our Enhanced Library Services project? So at the beginning of last year, we proceeded with the process of procurement of the new library management system. what we have in the background, what I'm going to outline is the discovery architecture for our new system. This was not in place with the InMagic library system. It's still in its fledgling stage. But allow us to share this initiative with you. We have not completed the project. It's a work in progress. But I believe a platform like today, this conference, is a way to share experiences. And it doesn't always need to be success stories. It's the pains we go through, the tribulations, how we overcame them. So the new library management system allowed us to install workflows on all our staff's machines. So it's a small piece of software, but the catalog itself is on the server, which is housed by our IT department. But bear in mind, we're here now, but we're already looking ahead. And Mr. Ntunja and myself and the team are of the opinion our next big step is the cloud. We do not want to be tied to software that must be installed on devices. We're also in the process of acquiring a digital repository because we are getting access to a lot of copyright material in digital format. We are initiating a digitization project within the library because we've got an immensely valuable and rare collection of historical items, which is locked away in cupboards, locked away in sections, not accessible to the public, not known by the public. And this digitization project will allow us to make these resources available. So with Symphony connected to Portfolio, as well as connected to third-party vendors' databases, we're looking at this integration and the discovery of these resources from one place. Do a search, search our catalog, search all our external databases, search our internal repository, and on one page, one search results page, have all of that material present itself. We've purchased the module that comes with the Cersei Dynex package called Enterprise, which is their discovery module, discovery platform. So it's a website which will now make our catalog and all our resources available to the whole world 24/7. We've stumbled across a few problems because for our purposes, the discovery module that comes with Cersei Dynex called eResource Central does not fulfill our purposes, and there are many technical hitches. So we are looking at another layer placed underneath the enterprise web portal, whether it be, for example, OCLC's WorldShare, Sabinet's Discovery Service. We are looking into those third-party discovery services to operate underneath our web page. Now we've gotten to the stage where we've transformed a situation where we've been in the dark, our services, our products have been in the dark. It's now visible to the world. We need a client interface. We need to be able to make this enterprise web portal available on all devices. So enterprise has been designed to be scalable, to be viewable, to be searchable, to be user-friendly on any device. And we're also in the process of acquiring an application that comes from the Cersei Dynex table that's called BookMine. But we've decided on going for BookMine Plus. Why BookMine Plus? It allows us to customize the app with our particular branding. So from a mobile device, you'll be able to access your user account. You'll be able to see your history of circulation. You can renew, you can put holds, you can save your searches. And of course, you can search the catalog and all our digital resources from the palm of your hand. I will now hand over the presentation to my colleague, Mr. Van Eck, and he'll continue with the other digital tools and services we're in the process of bringing into the library. Thank you.
Right, my part of it is to deal with the actual interfaces that we've designed. As Rian has mentioned, we have Enterprise that will become our actual face of the library, the website that you can find on any mobile or internet-enabled device. As we said, Enterprise is the main tool that we use. It has its own admin portal that allows you to configure it and to change things around, create rooms. What they call rooms would be separate web pages that you could put content on. But we want to actually further develop that and not just use the built-in tools. So we are using Dreamweaver CSX to create additional HTML and CSS to make it even more powerful with extra added content and tools that we can add and make the look and feel of the web page even better. Along with that, of course, we use Photoshop to create, edit, and provide graphics for our website. Another lovely tool that we use is called Flipping Book. With it, you can take a PDF file, a Word document, or any other kind of document and create an actual interactive book that it's online. It can flip, the sound of the pages, it's full text searchable, you can view the contents pages, all the thumbnails of it. It's proven quite popular with our clients. And lastly, Enterprise does come with what they call a carousel, which is like a little slide screen that shows the latest content from the library. Unfortunately, that takes its cue from the items that are in your catalog. And we thought we wanted something that's a little bit more interactive than just that. What if we wanted to add something that's not necessarily in the catalog? There's an event coming up in the library, and we want it to be shown on that slideshow as well. So we decided to went through a whole range of testing and looked at various products and decided on Easy Rotator to create our own little slideshow that we can now customize by our look and feel and add any kind of content we want there to showcase and to market what is going on in Parliamentary Information Centre. We also have decided on various access levels, your standard public portal that we've created where your public can access our services. Initially, it'll only be just a brief description of what the Parliamentary Information Service is, a bit about the history and the services we provide, and if everything works out well, actually open up our catalogue for the public to search. And then we'd have a private part that would only be for the Library of Parliament's Parliament's members and those who have the necessary access details. And behind that, you would get all of our digital content, our databases, our journals, and our other services available to you. One nice feature about Enterprise is it gives the client interactive access to his or her very own account, where you can look at your account details, change your password, work around there, change your details, refresh your details, just to check. You don't have to come to the library to do that anymore. You can do it online. You could also look at your checkouts. What books do you have available that you take out? What's the due date? Renew them if necessary. Place holds for items that you might want to have a look at later. You can manage your fines. And of course, most importantly for me, lists. You can create as many lists as you like. Name them what you want, email them, print them, delete them, but that way you can keep track of what's your most favorite items that you've used. The other device we're looking at is any other kind of mobile device, whether that be a tablet or a phone. As Rian mentioned, we are going to get the the BookMind Plus app. It's customizable, so we can make it look and feel so that it matches everything else and it looks seamless. This BookMind Plus app would also slot into the My Parliament app, which is currently being developed by a different project in Parliament to give parliamentarians their very own app with all of their parliamentary papers and documentation available. These two apps will slot in together seamlessly, so you, in fact, your MP could use the My Parliament app and without knowing it, actually use the BookMind Plus app and access their library details as well as search the catalogue without having to move around from multiple apps. Our iPads, we also purchased 10 iPads for the library, 5 of which we decided to lock down in a kiosk in a table in the main library, open for our clients, anybody to come into the library, specifically to access electronic newspapers. We have a newspaper collection which has proven massively popular and solved quite a few problems we had with getting printed copies out fast enough for people to access. In order to make that possible, we instituted a kiosk mode, which you get in iOS, to save ourselves from having to run around and change the settings, because people find they love fiddling with the settings, especially the photo, the camera. The tour groups would come in and they would see iPads and they'll take photos of everything in sight. So with a kiosk mode, we managed to lock that down so that people could, in peace, read their newspapers on our iPads. The last one I want to mention to you is digital displays. We're going to be purchasing 4 custom-made digital displays into which we will put content, made it interactive, and market our library in that way. The content will be gathered from all around Parliament. It would not necessarily just be Parliament. These displays will be owned by anybody in Parliament. Any other section who might want to use the display to market services or a new product that is going to be delivered for MPs can do so. It will be centrally managed by Parliament, by the Parliamentary Information Centre. The system we chose can handle any kind of format, whether it's HTML, PDF, a video, music files. We gather all of those, edit them with a smaller group of people to make sure that it fits into the structures that we want. We then create a template into which we can slide various bits of content to make a whole. These templates are then scheduled throughout all of the various displays throughout Parliament so that you can have them play at the specific times that you would like them to play. We'll have 4 of these displays with our various bits of content in them, interscheduled all over Parliament. The locations were chosen to get the best foot traffic so that you get your members where they are working, so they can interact and see what you've got provided for them. Content. All of our digital platforms would be nothing if we don't have anything to showcase on them. So side part of the project was to try and get more digital content into our library collection. And to start off with, as I mentioned, we went to Press Reader and boosted our collection with 4,350 newspapers and magazines in 62 languages and counting. As I said, our most popular offering at the moment. We also included World Bank eLibrary and OECD iLibrary, which added a whole host of books, papers, and statistics, and amongst those are plus minus 13,000 ebooks that was added, also very popular. And lastly, small but growing, and we're very proud of it, our acquisitions department had been in negotiation with several publishers, starting off with Media24 and AP Associated Press, to ask for permission to get the legal deposit magazines that we get posted in physical form, change it over and give it to us in a PDF format, which we can then put through Flipping Book and make available to our clients that way on their desktop where they're sitting. They don't necessarily have to come to the library. It's very much in its infancy, but it's growing fast. After all of this, we've decided we are not going to be sitting still. We have a wish list of possible future projects that we want to do. part of that is current awareness. We would like to develop a template that we can use to create a branded, standardized current awareness service to our clients, that our librarians and researchers can populate with the specific content that they would want to see surgically selected for those specific clients. We also, as Rian mentioned, want to go to Blue Cloud, which is Circe Dynex's next product, to replace Symphony. It's completely web-based, so you don't have to worry about software. All you need is your credentials to log in, and you can do your job anywhere. And lastly, probably very ambitiously, but very excitedly, we want to tackle geographical information systems, which in essence, you can take any kind of database set in an Excel form, for instance, and with this software, overlay that over a geographical map. So you could take your election results, for instance, for consecutive years, and overlay it over a map, and your client on an interactive interface can drill down to a specific year and see on that map where the election results for that year was. You can do the same for agricultural resources, water consumption, because waters are going to be a problem in South Africa, electricity consumption, for instance. All you need is an up-to-date statistical database and the software. So that is it from us.
Thank you very much. I'm speechless. I think our library is really feeling like a technological library. Our next presenter is now Ingrid Hendrik. If you can come forward, please.
Good morning, everyone. Right. For those of you who haven't met me yet, I'm what we call a control librarian or a senior librarian in charge of the Rare and Historical Information Services at Parliament of South Africa, Parliamentary Information Centre. And for this reason, my chosen topic is to speak about the relevance of rare and historical collections to today's Parliament. So, just a quick breakdown. I'll go through a bit of an introduction and give you some background, which is going to be sounding rather similar to what Mr. Ntunja spoke about earlier. Two definitions, and then get into the discussion and go towards the end. So, many parliamentarians realize that information is of benefit to them, for them in order to participate in the parliamentary processes for an effective democracy. They understand that they need information to make wise decisions and to support the democratic principles enshrined in our Constitution. Thus, in today's fast-paced technological world, parliamentarians require swift access to impartial, current, accurate, and timely information. So for parliamentary libraries, the challenge is to constantly develop innovative new services and to keep up with the technological advances. So this is done within the universal constraint of limited financial resources and a decline in requests for traditional library services accompanied by a need to show return on investment or value of existence. Coupled to this, most libraries have numerous other challenges, including insufficient shelving space to house their abundant collections, since even in this digital age, the library has a space shortage for all the information resources it wants to collect. So space management, or collection management, if we rather want to talk about that, as it is officially referred to, has become an important organizational and management activity that can potentially contribute hugely to infrastructure costs. In light of this, the question of keeping books, which are perceived as old and irrelevant, has been uttered in the back passages of some libraries, and most definitely in ours. What is referred to here is not simply the weeding of collections, but the relevance of actually keeping special collections or rare and historical material. And in South Africa's case, this is made up mostly of Afrikaner materials dating to the colonial and apartheid era of South African history. So the Parliamentary Information Centre, as Mr. Ntunja earlier said, is one of the oldest existing libraries in South Africa. And the majority of parliamentary libraries started as traditional libraries. And they reflected the nature of the specific society which was dominant at that time. And thus it is also true that every parliamentary library in the English Dominion, in other words, where England or the UK had been the colonial masters, has a significant special collection incorporating a large collection of local literature, or literature that is about that country. It is a national treasure of reference works for the future. The collection reflects the notion of the day being that of collectors of books rather than disseminators of information. The emphasis of the collection was thus on cultural heritage and materials of local interest, however, from a Eurocentric perspective. So we can begin this discussion with why we actually collect books, or specifically rare books. This is because books are largely seen as the documentary record and heritage of man, and thus form part of what is seen as the inheritance of the world. Books are the natural product or result of our activities, of individuals, organizations, and they serve as the recorded memory thereof. Likewise, man is inherently curious about his beginnings. So according to Leroux, an Englishman in the 16th century began to regret the loss of the beautiful medieval illuminated manuscripts and thus started collecting them. Similarly, Afrikaner collecting only began in the 20th century, mainly because indigenous printing in South Africa only started after 1824, when newspapers were first published. Book printing as such only started in the early 20th century after demand was created by the influx of Europeans seeking their fortunes on the diamond and gold fields of South Africa. Prior to this, most books were imported from the Netherlands and the UK. Some people believe old books are a medium through which we can touch our past, as they provide evidence of the great civilizations of long ago. The challenge then is, specifically from within the South African context, is one of cultural relevance. We sit with a so-called colonial chestnut, and it has been around for some time, and it has its roots in the imperial ideas where the book was a symbol of English authority, but also seen as a gift to civilize the colonized subjects. The questions thus raised in general include how relevant these special collections are to today's information needs of our parliamentarian users. More specifically, is it part of the mandate of a parliamentary library to keep such collections, and for what purpose? South Africans have been debating the relevance of keeping colonial and apartheid-era statues And these debates also surface each time South Africa chooses to change a place name. Sparked perhaps by this discussion, questions were also raised during this year's Franschhoek Literary Festival about the white domination of the literary system. Thus, without going into detail of the issue of cultural relevance itself, we can ask ourselves whether these debates further fuel the one surrounding other cultural representations, such as books, manuscripts, and the role that the parliamentary special collections play in these. I'm going to try and answer some of these questions. So before we get to our discussion, I just want to go through two definitions. The first concept is, what is a special collection? Typically, special collections are a concentration of books on any given subject and are not necessarily rare, but they deserve special treatment that the general stack area is unable to supply. Special collections are also materials containing primary evidence for scholarship and that require special treatment in their description or handling. The second concept is, what is a rare book? A rare book is one that is often old, but it may also be valuable. But it can also be not easily replaced, or it can be irreplaceable. We could also describe it as a particular copy of a book, such as a specific edition or a limited print run. A rare book is also a book that is often in demand and that there are not enough copies available in circulation, and thus increasing the price of the book. Thus, demand and scarcity should both be present simultaneously for the book to be rare. While these two terms represent two differing concepts in theory, I'm going to be using them both loosely in this discussion, interchangeably. I like this quote that I've taken from Norwich, which states that a book should illuminate the long struggle of man to recognize, understand, and record the discovery of new lands, new and changing fauna and flora, political upheavals and changes in the life of a developing nation and its people. And I think it quite encompasses everything that South Africa represents. So let's carry on then to the relevance of special collections. If we look at the function of a parliament, that it is the country's central legislative institution of a democratic government, it goes without saying that parliamentarians are expected to be informed on a wide range of subjects, and thus should have a vast appetite for information. Parliamentarians not only need to be able to solve local problems, but also those of the nation and of the world as a whole. Thus, the success should depend on their ability to access and utilize the right information at the right time. In general, the existence and level of utilization of a parliamentary library is thus closely related to the actual level of democracy achieved in the country. Thus, the more advanced the democratic principles in place, the greater the need for information and research by parliamentarians in order to perform efficiently and effectively. Yet in light of this, it is found that libraries often experience the problem of underutilization. We know that the kind of information sources available also play a significant role in the services or products offered. The preservation of materials, such as is found in travel accounts, has value for historical, social, and cultural research. So while South Africa continues to grapple with the issue of cultural identity and the dominant colonial Eurocentric mindset, the Parliamentary Information Centre houses several invaluable collections, such as the mentioned Sidney Mendelssohn collection and the William Jardine collection. The Mendelssohn collection was bequeathed by Sir Sidney Mendelssohn, who made his fortune on the diamond fields of Kimberley in the 1870s. The collection is one of Parliament's, and indeed this country's, most valuable collections of books relating to Africa, and includes over 300 original paintings and artworks, caricatures, and some manuscripts. Mendelssohn's aim was to collect everything ever written about Southern Africa, with the vision of developing this collection into a national library of Africana. And it is for this reason that the Mendelssohn collection is of great historical significance and interest. For before van Riebeeck set foot ashore, not far from here, there were several European travelers to our country who, as for example the French explorer François Lavalliane, recorded and graphically illustrated our indigenous inhabitants, fauna and flora. Special collections have existed in parallel to normal library collections to support preservation of the human record, as instanced in original documents, or in specific documents of importance. We need only look at UNESCO's Memory of the World program and take, for example, the Dutch East India Company, which was the largest commercial enterprise in the world in its heyday. Its archives contain unique primary source information on the history of countries, including South Africa, of course. Thus, books contain valuable historical information, and these books may be used for the celebration of significant anniversaries, such as World War I. Historical and political studies cannot disregard the records of the past. If, and especially when, the history of time is constantly reinterpreted, the manner in which we gain insight into the past is through historical research. Historical research is the process of systematically examining past events to give an account of what has happened in the past. But why do we conduct historical research? Excuse me, I'm just going to have a sip of water. Okay, so we conduct historical research to answer questions, to uncover the unknown, to identify the relationship that the past has to the present, to record and evaluate the accomplishments of individuals, agencies, and institutions, to assist in understanding the culture in which we live, and to uncover the unknown. Inherently, thus, historical research is done using old and rare books. They throw light on our social and cultural history, or the mode of life in long-gone days. It also shows the reading matter in existence at a particular period of time, as well as the prominent people who were leaders of the time. Even though collections inevitably reflect what is judged to be historically important at that point in time, it is more specifically the way that these collections have been managed, profiled, promoted, and researched that elucidates what is judged to be significant as history. Within a narrow conception of South African history, history must be preserved no matter how repulsive it is. Items of value in the cultural growth of any country are of value to historians and as a source of information to many people. We need to respect cultural heritage as a sign of cultural identity and a source of sustainable development, preventing damage that could hinder its transmission for future generations. So a special collection would then be a reminder of where we find ourselves. And it is these collections, within these collections, that a deep archive exists of the complexity of what has been in our country and continent, from which the imagination of what we may still become will arise. The challenge is to understand this material within its cultural context, in finding relevant and appropriate information, and to choose not to be trapped in history, but to turn it around into something positive, to support the decisions to be made and the actions to be taken. Libraries as cultural heritage institutions perform the role of public custodian and provide the nation with access to this published legacy and promote access to information and a reading culture. Special collections are central to understanding the future. The newest white paper on arts, culture and heritage states that the preservation, promotion and natural progression of arts, culture and heritage should no longer be seen merely as showing where we come from and how we express ourselves. Arts, culture and heritage are integral to the social life of society and has inherent developmental and social transformative value. Other benefits include generating mutual respect amongst individuals, providing previously disadvantaged individuals with opportunities to achieve human dignity, as well as social and material well-being, and promoting peace, friendship, tolerance, and national unity. Since special collections books often have to do with ideas, information, and the understanding of the human spirit, active steps could also be taken to explore and identify the economic value and opportunity inherent in the cultural and creative industries. It can thus be concluded that books especially worth reading are those that record man's most significant ideas and actions. Rare book and special collections preserve these titles and others that for varying reasons are considered special and possibly humanity's conscience. Special collections are consequently be a source of pride, expertise and excellence, and these qualities can motivate useful investments. Within the South African context, the Legal Deposit Act of 1997 is especially aimed at preserving South Africa's intellectual and cultural heritage. The Act is specific to provide for the preservation of the national documentary heritage through legal deposit of published materials, and the Parliamentary Information Centre is one of the receiving libraries and has been since 1950. Thus, it can be inferred that to collect, record, preserve, and make available the national documentary heritage should be one of the objectives of the Parliamentary Information Centre, but to do so specifically within its users' framework. The exception is for, the library is also known to be the library of last resort, especially in terms of government information. Other aims of promoting an awareness and appreciation of books and fostering information literacy remain the task of a national library. Some recommendations. Over time, research libraries, often driven by fiscal constraint, have needed to sharpen their collecting focus, to establish substantial expertise and identity in limited, specialized subject areas. In rethinking collecting focuses for special collections, it is desirable to find areas of congruence between the ongoing institutional commitments and opportunities for regional, national, or even international distinctiveness. Serving the former ensures the usefulness of special collections to the primary clientele from the home institution, whereas responding to the latter attracts visiting researchers and makes the library a center for scholarship, and knowledge of regional resources and cooperative plans is also of use in this area. Such resources and cooperative plans can guide rare book collection development. by suggesting where current holdings can support new areas of development or where new areas of development may lead to costly duplication. In pursuing opportunities to be of value to the parent institution while still fulfilling the mission to preserve and promote an interest in history, we must recast special collections to appeal to our unique user needs. Furthermore, special collections need to focus on the acquisition of 20th and 21st century materials, but again, with specialization and distinctiveness, based on geography, language, ethnicity, subject, or other collecting criteria. Actions need to be taken to promote access and use, and to re-examine and redefine collecting focus in conjunction with the institutional priorities. And this will go a far way to repositioning special collections accordingly. In terms of making special collections accessible, digitization has a significant role to play, as you just heard from Rian. We must, however, also avoid the glut of information and the possible financial black hole of technology. Nevertheless, we must also seize the public relations potential of placing digitized versions of attractive holdings onto the web. We need to understand that digitized text and images are only a new form of transmission that should be logical extensions of normal services with materials supporting the institution's research mission. We also need more complete descriptions of our holdings, with a clearer, and this will lead to a clearer understanding of our holdings that subsequently defines the relationship of special collections to the general collection. In summary, thus, the value of special collections can be divided into four main value streams. The informational value, that is the research value that is offered in relation to places, people, events, periods, projects, or processes. Administrative value, this is the functional usefulness of the resources to an organization, such as archives. Artifactual value, this is the case of rare items or interesting objects where the value is derived from the nature of the material. And then associated value. This is where materials have a relationship to an eminent person, for example, Nelson Mandela's personal diary. The institution that supports rare books with the necessary levels of funding has every right to expect a high degree of correlation between institutional goals and objectives and those of the rare book library. A properly established rare book library needs to publicize its resources to researchers and others. At the same time, each such library must strive to maintain conditions that will preserve its holdings physically and intellectually. So in conclusion, as institutions that organize cultural and intellectual records, parliamentary libraries are responsible for providing research and cultural opportunities that can transcend institutional and increasingly national boundaries. Our holdings constitute a treasury of knowledge from which to build new histories, write new stories, and research South Africa's collective intertwined past. For our country is moving on from its past, and we have here the papers of important South Africans who have played a role in defining the character of this country. In conclusion, thus, the world needs to be deeply aware of where we find ourselves currently, because we have here in this country right now the intense coming together of puzzles. I'd like to finish off with this quote: "History is open-ended. Truth is never fully formed. It is always flexible, and each generation has to write its own history, seeing how the dots from the past project into the future." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ingrid. From Language Services, we'll have Mr. Thomas Ntuli.
Thank you, Program Director, and good day, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity and thank Mr. Ntunja for affording me this opportunity to deliver my maiden paper during this special month in the history of South Africa. I really appreciate that opportunity. Due to time constraints, I will not waste any more time. If you look in the program, you'll find that my title was registered as the implementation of the South African parliamentary language policy. And then my actual title will be the quality of interpreting services. Case study, the Parliament of South Africa. And in compliance with Section 6 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, Act 108 of 1996, which outlines the official languages of the Republic as Sepedi, Sesotho, Setswana, Siswati, Tshivenda, Chitsonga, Afrikaans, English, isiNdebele, isiXhosa, and isiZulu, plus South African Sign Language. The Parliament of South Africa approved the National Language Policy Framework in 2003, and the Joint Rules Committee approved the Language Policy of Parliament in August 2003. And its first phase was implemented in 2004. And Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa contains the Bill of Rights, which are the cornerstone of democracy in South Africa. And Section 30 of the Constitution guarantees members of Parliament to use, or the right to use their languages of their choice during parliamentary debate. Therefore, interpretation service in Parliament was a need to bridge the gap in the communication discourse during parliamentary debates, as not all members of Parliament are conversant with all 11 official languages, plus sign language. So interpreting was intended for those who are not conversant with the source language. And language services section embarked on a drive to recruit language practitioners for all 11 official languages of South Africa, plus sign language. And this drive saw the establishment of the establishment of the interpreting unit, the unit that I'm currently acting on or heading currently, to interpret parliamentary proceedings in all official languages. And the language services section is comprised of 3 units, namely interpreting unit, reporting unit, translation unit. And interpreting unit provides interpreting services to the National Assembly, National Council of Provinces, and to parliamentary committees, as well as sectoral parliament events. And reporting unit provides verbatim transcription of member speeches in order to compile the unrevised Hansard. The unrevised Hansard refers to the concatenation and collation of the transcriptions of member speeches into debates in which they occurred before final proof editing. And translation unit translates all parliamentary documents and questions. And LSS has a newly created unit which is called Hansard Publishing. However, my main focus on this paper will be on the interpreting unit. Introduction. What is interpreting? Interpreting is the facilitation of oral or sign language communication from the source into the target language, either simultaneously or consecutively. It is a very specialized and stressful field, which requires special skills. In other words, not everyone can be an interpreter. As you can see, the interpreters are interpreting in the booth. It's very strenuous in there. And this was evident during the Nuremberg war crimes trials in 1945 to 1946, whereby interpreters were appointed based on their degrees and language skills, but without interpreting skills. And most of them, when they come into court, they just, froze in front of the microphone because it's not easy. It's really demanding. So in Parliament, we have two modes of interpreting. That is simultaneous interpreting, which is a really highly complex discourse performance during which language perception, comprehension, analyzing, reformulation, and production operations are carried out visually in parallel and within tight time constraints. And consecutive interpreting. The interpreter has the liberty to be in the same physical space as the source language speaker and has time to listen and take notes and only conveys the intended message after the speaker is finished. And the professional language bodies. In South Africa, we have the South African Translators Institute, which is a sole accreditation body currently, for which I'm an accredited professional member. And most of interpreters in Parliament do not belong to this body because they cannot afford its annual subscriptions. And quality is very much important. And for one to be able to deliver quality, one must undergo an accreditation test and pass the accreditation test. So basic concern underlining the process of professionalism. Australia remains unique in the sense that it has a national accreditation authority for translators and interpreters. And this body gives an accreditation to training courses and administer tests for recognition of different levels of vocational linguistic qualifications in more than 40 languages. Franz Pochhaker, 2004. And the South African Language Council Act, Act number 8 of 2014, provides for the establishment of an accreditation body. This body is not yet established in South Africa to accredit interpreters, so we still have a challenge currently. And the main problem, quality. What is quality? The notion of quality in respect of simultaneous interpreting has varying interpretations. Quality from the interpreter's perspective. Jean Lefil, 1990, says, interpreters' evaluation of their own output is usually not reliable. This is likely to be the fact since some interpreters regard themselves as professional, even though they do not have the required qualifications and skills actually to regard themselves as professionals. And quality from the user's perspective. Interpreting should always be judged from the perspective of the listener and never as an end in itself. Actually, even the listener, he or herself, is not a competent judge when it comes to quality. And the next one will be quality from the speaker's perspective. Bochum 2006 states that as a mediator between the source and the target language, an interpreter is expected to render the speaker's message as accurate as possible. In other words, the interpreter should be an honest spokesperson of the speaker. The interpreter must be able to take the speaker into his confidence. That's what is important as well. And this paper is premised on the following assumption. Whether complaints continually received from members of parliament that the quality of simultaneous interpreting in the Parliament of South Africa is not up to standard are justified or not. While premised on that above mentioned assumption, this paper is further driven by the concern that if members of parliament complaints are not attended to, the resulting situation could likely lead to members of parliament to no longer have interest in of using their home languages or languages of their choice during House debates, but resorting to use English only, a situation that will have a negative impact on the promotion and development of multilingualism, as well as previously disadvantaged languages. Now, it is upon us as a section to develop and transform and have a mind shift in order to meet the expectation of members of parliament. Research, question, and hypothesis. Aspects such as recruitment, level of training or qualifications, working conditions of interpreters, etc., are accorded differing values. Consequently, a number of research questions worth investigating in the context of simultaneous interpreting offered in the Parliament of South Africa were raised. They are as follows. Does the simultaneous interpreting practical test undertaken by interviews determine quality in simultaneous interpreting? Does interpreting unit provide formal training in simultaneous interpreting to interpreters before they assume their duties? Are the recruitment advertisement relevant to attract most suitable candidates for interpreting positions? Do interviews panels constitute language and technical specialists who are able to select the best suitable candidates? Are the working conditions of interpreters conducive to the delivery of quality interpreting services? Those are questions that need to be asked. Aims and objectives, just due to time constraints, colleagues. Aims and objectives. The aim of this study was to investigate the quality of interpreting service rendered in Parliament of South Africa, aspects surrounding recruitment and appointment of interpreters, which is vital for the actual service. In order to obtain the above stated goals, interpreting literature has been reviewed during the literature review. I will not repeat this as it is there in slide number 5. And the study has, among others, investigated the advertisement used to recruit language practitioners, the interview process for shortlisted candidates, interpreting assessment test conducted during interview process, and the provision of training. And the methodology, I'll be very brief, time is really against me. Theoretical component. Focus on literature. No sources were actually found in South Africa while I was conducting this research. I relied on European Parliament. An empirical component focuses on the actual data that will be gathered and the interpretation thereof. After obtaining necessary permission from the Secretary to Parliament to conduct empirical research in Parliament, relevant interpreting literatures was reviewed, attending interpreters' interviews as an observer, conducting unstructured interviews with some supervisors of interpreters, recording interpreters while interpreting in the House, reviewing current advertisement for interpreters in Parliament, reviewing the testing method used by language services section during the interviews of interpreters, and develop and distributed questionnaires to relevant stakeholders for their inputs regarding interpreting service in Parliament. Findings. Interpreting service was not up to standard. That's by then, was not up to standard. The study reveals that 59% of the sample of members of Parliament have a problem with inaccuracy of interpreting service. No formal training for interpreters. The study reveals that 32% of sample of members of Parliament recommends that interpreters should first receive intensive training before assuming their interpreting duties. The study also reveals that 65% of sample of interpreters join Parliament without interpreting skills, and they have not received interpreting training by then. So the provision of member speech. The study reveals that 18% of sample of members are of the view that the provision of speeches to interpreters could attribute to improvement of quality in interpreting. And working conditions not conducive. The study reveals that 77% of the sample of interpreters says working conditions in Parliament are not conducive to deliver quality interpreting services. I would have expanded to that, but there is no time. Recruitment of interpreters, no interpreting related questions asked during interpreting candidates. During a practical test, only English is tested. Candidates' first language is not tested. It was then, but now we have now improved. It means my recommendations have been now implemented. So recommendations, training of interpreters. Training of interpreters is now going to take place. Payment of affiliation fees for language practitioners. That is something that management is still going to discuss. Provision of member speeches. That is something that needs to be attended to. Senior management will assist in this regard. Improving working conditions. In this regard, in terms of the standard operation procedures, interpreters should be in the booth for, say, 2 hours. More than 2 hours, there is no more quality. So because we are short-staffed, our interpreters are confined in the booth for about 4 up to 5 hours. Then how can we expect quality? That is why we recommend that there must be an increase on manpower. We must recruit more interpreters in order to comply to this. And presentation during members of Parliament, that is very much important, that as a section, we must give presentation to members of Parliament for them to understand how to use our services. Because really, it's a problem to provide a service to clients and only to find that the client doesn't understand your service. Thank you very much, colleagues. I will not read this due to time constraint. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ntuli. And now we'll call our very own Ms. Papa Swart.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me just thank the library for this opportunity to present at the IFLA pre-conference. My name is Barbara Swartz. I'm from documentation section. And we, together with the library and the research unit, we are part of the knowledge and information services section. First of all, I'm just going to say that how I relate this particular paper to your work is that we, in documentation section, one of our functions is records management. And I'm going to talk about the records management and the contribution that we think it can make to knowledge management. We know that libraries in the course of their works, I might mention that I'm also a librarian, or I used to be a librarian, and I used to work at the Library of Parliament, so I'm very well aware that libraries use all sorts of resources to fulfill the needs of their clients, and that they also, therefore, are interested in the institutional records, because sometimes they have to call upon that to satisfy the queries of their clients. And secondly, I'm also aware that the library does have in its possession some of the institutional records, but we'll talk about that later. We're going to start with looking at the background to knowledge management of Parliament. Then I'm going to look at the objectives of knowledge management at Parliament, the role of records management, the current status of records management, our strategy to tackle the problems that we're facing, and then talk a little bit about our implementation. I'm not going to, because you have the paper, I'm not going to go into detail, and I do know that we're running over time. Just in terms of background, I want to say that the business processes of Parliament are guided by the Financial Management of Parliament Act, and one of the responsibilities there for the accounting officer, which is the Secretary of Parliament, is that he should present a strategic plan by a certain time, and the strategic plan is then tabled in Parliament, and once it's accepted, then that informs the objectives towards which we strive. Last year we had elections, we have a fifth Parliament, and there's a new strategic plan that was tabled in February. And there are strategic priorities that were identified for the fifth Parliament, including the strengthening of oversight and accountability, enhancing public involvement, deepening the engagement in international fora, strengthening cooperative governance, that is at the national, provincial, and local sphere, and then also looking at the impact of legislation that were passed and strengthening that capacity to pass legislation. One of the crucial aspects that are mentioned in the strategic plan from both, I think, the library point of view, from our point of view, from research point of view, is that there was an acknowledgement that Parliament needs to have access to better information. So there's a phrase in there where it talks about increasing knowledge and information services, research and record keeping. So for us, that places, it's very important because it places a very high value on information, and it articulates the need to increase the access to critical information for decision making at various levels of the organization. For us, the other thing that was important was that the head of the Knowledge and Information Services Division, Mr. Nell, he was tasked with developing a knowledge management framework for Parliament, so that Parliament can, by using that or developing that framework, it can then capitalize on the information and knowledge at its disposal. As I said earlier, documentation section forms part of the division, and we are concerned with records management. And for us, the relationship between information management, records management, and knowledge management is clear, and that we believe that those concepts are intertwined, and that record management, from our perspective, which is a function that we must support the institution with, is fundamental to knowledge management. So we are concerned with that subset of documents that are identified as the authoritative sources of evidence of the business transaction of the organization. And we felt that if we could then assist the organization to manage its records properly, then we would then help with the basis for proper information management. And once that is established, then the knowledge management initiatives can be built on that. Quickly, in terms of the objectives of knowledge management, I must also say that the knowledge management framework that Mr. Nell has developed is based on the framework, the bigger framework that was developed for knowledge management that was developed by the legislative sector. And the aim of that broader framework was to improve institutional performance across all the legislatures, deliver faster turnaround times, and endeavor so that institutions endeavor to become also learning institutions. The definition of knowledge management that was given in the framework is very practical, and it defines knowledge management as the location, storage, processing, and distribution of knowledge, competency, and expertise in Parliament, and also to increase the access to information of the public so that the processes of democracy are facilitated. So basically, then, the aim is to use the collective intelligence of all the legislatures to meet the objectives of their strategic plans. In terms of knowledge management, specifically in our Parliament, the aim is to manage knowledge, to improve decision-making, planning, etc., to share best practices, to avoid duplication by improving efficiency, to improve collaboration, share institutional knowledge, generate new knowledge, faster turnaround times in terms of the processes that we have to engage in, and then also, last but not least, save paper and increase efficiency in business processes. In terms of records management, one of the first initiatives within the knowledge management framework is the Norms and Standards Initiatives, which is led by Mr. Nell. And that is aimed at developing norms and standards for the handling and processing of information. What that particular initiative aims to do is, first of all, to locate within Parliament those vital and valuable pockets of information, to see, to put it through a process to determine the quality of that information and to capture it in some form or other in repositories so that it becomes available for use. And then furthermore, it also aims to then develop standard operating procedures for the way that information is handled across the information and the way information is documented across the institution. And that is where we also felt that we had a vital role to play in how we standardize the handling of information by ensuring that records management standards are set and that they are implemented and that they are adhered to. So at an individual level, then, we would then look at how the individual staff member manages their documents and records, and we would then teach them to take responsibilities for documents from the time that it's created, whether it becomes a record or not, and how they store them, how they classify them, and how they dispose of it. And we would do that for both information or records that come from both inside and outside the institution. I'm not going to define records because that is somewhere in the paper. In terms of the current status of records management at Parliament is that we do have a policy, but it is not implemented. So in terms of standardized practices, that is currently non-existent or only existed in small pockets. Mostly people have their own systems, and sometimes there's a lot of duplication because people cannot distinguish between what is a document, what is a record, what is a copy, and so forth, what is the original, and so forth. So people tend not to trust, they only trust themselves, and so each one gathers and keeps their own documents and records. Sometimes people complain that, especially when we met with committees last week or the week before last, one of their problems is that when people leave, they don't hand over to their successors sometimes, so that people throw away things, and when the next person comes into that position, they don't have the knowledge of what happened before. The other problem that we face is there's a real risk if there are legal challenges, because if you don't keep proper records, you would be unable to provide the courts with evidence as to how you arrived at a decision and that sort of thing. Many times in an institution also, when it comes to institutional memory, we act as if the organization started yesterday, and yet the same problems keep occurring. The same issues are faced by communities all over. Like, for instance, recently, it might be a problem in the community. There were visits over the different cycles of Parliament. Things were done about these things. Things were discussed. Things were supposed to be implemented or were implemented. But because people don't keep systematic records, the next generation that comes on doesn't have that to draw on. It is not organized systematically, as committees say they wish that they have. If they go on an oversight visit and it's a problem of maybe water in some area in settlement in Limpopo, and they know that they would like to know at a touch of a button what has happened before, what was discussed before, so that they can draw on that information and then make use of that institutional memory. So people do not have access to contextualized information, or the information scattered across the organization. So there's difficulty in retrieving information. People have a lot of documents that they shouldn't be keeping, because if it was sorted out in what you should keep and what you shouldn't keep, you would have space, so we have a space problem. And then we also we're also in the process of replacing our electronic document and records management system. So we sort of in the process of moving from one system to the other. And because we came on the new system, I think the driving force for the new system was the My Parliament app that was managed earlier. And we are now becoming involved so that that system also works for us from a records management perspective. In terms of our strategy, we must adhere to the National Archives and Records Services Act of South Africa, which governs the function of records management in all public institutions. So we have to learn to manage our records effectively, so that we can be accountable, so that we can be transparent, so that the institution can protect itself, so that we can provide reliable information when we are required to, so that we can make effective decisions, and that we can understand the history and the context of business decisions. And so, yeah. So we actually do have a greater responsibility, because we have to account to South Africa in terms of our actions and our activities. So in our strategy, our purpose is to get organizational commitment and buy-in at the top level. We want to enhance awareness of the importance of records management and the responsibilities and accountabilities related thereto. We want to ensure that there's systematic approaches to managing records in all formats. We want to ensure that we identify records that are of long-term value. We want to ensure compliance to the legislative and the regulatory framework, and we want to ensure that there's efficiency and best value by improving the flow of information if by coordinating the flow of records and storage systems. Elements in our strategy include involving top management in the project and getting commitment and cooperation from all levels. Secondly, we need to look at the management of records and then implement systems that are user-friendly and efficient. And we also need to ensure that we produce quality records that are authentic and accurate. We need to look at the responsibilities for records and teach people to change their culture and behavior and the way that they handle records. We need to look at the security and access to records. We need to look at training and support. We need to look at records management standards to ensure that they are maintained. So we need to audit that from time to time. And we need to look at our structure and our resources. In terms of the buy-in from top management, we have said earlier that that is already for us, that we can tick that box because the value of information and knowledge and record keeping has been acknowledged in the strategic plan. So it's just for us to then implement, and ensure that the records are managed efficiently. Some, as I was saying earlier, there are some managers who realize that they need to manage their records properly, and they've asked for assistance. We've also ensured that the management of records are embedded in the performance management scorecards of managers so that they will be evaluated on how well records are managed in their area. So they have to do certain things. They have to see that there's proper storage base. They have to appoint records officers that will liaise with us. They need to allow us to inspect those areas, etc. They need to send their people for training and so on and so on. We've already done some things. We've already, in terms of the processes for managing records, we've updated the policy, the file plan of Parliament and the retention schedule so that we know what records we have and how long that we should be keeping them. And we've involved people from various sections in that. That also creates that awareness. We are busy updating the policy and procedures, and with the help of our subject matter experts like legal services, risk management, etc., etc. And we've invited, for instance, the library also to be part of that process. So it gets people thinking about records management, and also we need their input because some or other we feel that some of them should be more involved in the process. Then once the policy, the policy and procedures therefore will be very helpful in clarifying the roles and responsibilities. We also plan to, in terms of assisting, and we feel it will assist very much, Mr. Nell, is we're going to work on an extended file plan where we can understand, we take the file plan, we add more columns, so that we can understand where records are located in the institution, who has access to it, the formats that we have, how they are stored, what legislation applies to those categories of records. And so we will be building up a full picture of our information resources, and that will basically serve as the information audit that that needs to be part of the implementation of the knowledge management framework. So that will serve our purpose, but it will also serve their purpose. And the extended file plan will also help us to judge the scope of our project and measure progress. And we will use that information to help build the new EDRMS system so that they can develop the system to meet our needs as well. Shortly, I'm almost done. We've had 3 requests for assistance so far, and we base that on what we've put in the balance scorecard as well, and also the challenges people face. Committees will be our biggest challenge because they are a huge section, and they also have lots of information that must be put at the disposal of Parliament. And that information that they produce drives the processes of Parliament. So we will be working on them, with them. Currently, we're in the process of gathering information from them so that we can plan an intervention in committees. And we will start in a very incremental manner because we don't have all the resources at our disposal, but we will work with what we have, and we hope to have more in the future. So, in conclusion, I can say that we have defined a role for ourselves in terms of this knowledge management initiative. And our role will be to teach people to manage their records and their documents in terms of specific standards and the processes that will be put in place by the records management policy and procedures. And in that way, we feel we would have assisted the knowledge management initiative and ensured that it started on a solid foundation. If Parliament can benefit from its rich history, then we can surely improve the efficiency of our decision and the time it takes to make decisions. It is now time for us to start implementing by ensuring that there's a project plan that dovetails with the knowledge management initiative and that complements the efforts to leverage the institutional knowledge. And if we can ensure that the records live, that the records are available, that they are authentic, that they are organized for use, then we are happy that we have contributed greatly to knowledge management in the institution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barbara. It's now time for comments, questions, discussions, and we'll only allow 5 minutes because we are running behind schedule. I'll take a question from that lady.
I have 2 questions, and I don't know if Albert can answer both. I thought it was interesting that your strategy had an emphasis on disaster management, and I wonder if you could tell us why that had such a prominence. It was interesting for me, and also whether the language policy significantly affects your collection policy. Do you have to collect literature in all 11 languages as well?
Is another question. Maybe I should answer this one, or let me answer this question. The disaster management plan is in the process of being developed. There are various issues that are affecting the Parliamentary Information Center. Firstly, we rely on our ICT department to ensure that all our information and resources are safe. And we are not sure how safe are they. So we need a plan for ourselves to ensure that in terms of a disaster, we are able to recover information. We also have a physical problem. If you remember, I spoke about the refurbishment of the library. In winter, we experience what we'd call leakages. And the library books, the computers, staff would be affected because of the weather. That we needed a plan to deal with that. So that is being developed, taking into account all other issues that will affect that plan. What was the second question?
Collecting in all of the languages.
Okay, we're mostly collecting in English. And we are moving away from collection development policies that you normally find in libraries, especially universities. We want to look at content development strategy. We are not a university library or public library where you just collect for the sake of filling the shelves. We look at the content of Parliament and we develop that content. We come a step lower than a collection. We look at specific issues instead of looking at broader subjects, as you'll find in universities. That prompted us to look at where can we find current information that can be disseminated immediately to members of Parliament. And most of the information that they use is not found in books. So how do you move from books to instant online information? That's what informs our content development strategy instead of collection development policy. Thank you.
Okay.
Innocent Program is my name. I guess you are pointing at me. Okay.
Yes. After you start.
Okay. I thank you, South Africa, for the development and transformation taking place in the Parliament information sector. I appreciate also the rebranding that was based on speed, innovation, and so on and so forth. I wanted to know whether the rebranding of the name caused a change in the rebranding of the designation of staff. Are they still called librarians, catalogers, and so on and so forth? Or there are some .com names and designations that has come with that? Thank you.
Ask that one before I answer this one.
Thank you. And let's take your question, sir, before he can answer.
My question will be addressed in Portuguese. Queria saber se eu sou cambiante de Angola. Queria saber se tanto o arquivo de que falou a senhora Bárbara faz parte tanto da biblioteca, se está separado ou está tudo junto. Tanto, a minha pergunta é muito simples. e porque na visita que fizemos ontem não vi o arquivo. Era tudo. Muito obrigado.
Let me answer my part. Barbara will answer that question on records management. Rebranding didn't end up with the name of removal of library from Library of Parliament to Parliamentary Information Center. We also changing from librarian to information specialists instead of librarians. We have introduced a name for catalogers, which is called metadata specialists. That project, sub-project on organizational change and organizational development looks at those aspects of trying to relook at the traditional names that are used in the library, and look at what are the trends outside, and relooking at also the new services. How do they enhance these names? As I've said, that it can be old bottles but the same wine, the same librarians, they just changed the name. So we take into consideration those issues.
Thanks, Nomzamo. I gather the question was whether we're part of the library or not. No, we are not part of the library. We're part, the research, the library, and documentation section are all part of the Knowledge and Information Services Division, but we're not part of the library. So our particular function, among some others, are related to records management. I'm not sure if there's a follow-up question or if it's clear.
Okay. Any other questions for other presenters? Okay, you lady, and then the guy at the back, after this lady. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Agi. I wanted to find out if the enterprise software comes at a cost, and that is if it's an open source or it's a licensed software. And if so, how has it affected your implementation in terms of training staff as well as the people that are involved in using it? Thank you.
I delegate that question to Rian and Betty.
Okay, from my part, I can say that it's not open sourced, it is licensed, so you do pay for it. Training on enterprise, it's a very easy system to use. It's basically just your website. So we would train our librarians how to use it, how to search for information, and then also so that they can train the client from there on how to use that new platform. Enterprise does come with an administrative portal, which is a little bit more technical based, which your systems librarian and selected librarians inside will then use to administrate the actual portal and give access in various levels and so on.
Yeah. İshak Bozkurt from Grand National Assembly of Turkey. My question is for, if I remember correctly, Mr. Ryan Thornton. Your geographical information system in the wish list is very impressive. If it is not a wish, if you have some steps on this, I would like to find out how would you like to manage the data compilation from the national statistics institutions?
I have the privilege to delegate. Can Rian or Betty answer that question? Rian has delegated that question to Betty.
Lucky me. It's on our wish list purely because it's something we definitely want to get to look at. At the moment, we haven't really in-depth studied it. We've basically looked at some of the pieces of software that's out there and started doing our research. So I cannot give you much details on how we would actually go about achieving it and how broad, at least initially, our product would be that we made available. So unfortunately, I can't really answer your question, but come back in a couple of years and I'll give you everything you want.
This is going to be a real challenge for you.
Okay, there's a hand there.
Thank you. I'm John Vagonza from Parliament of Uganda. You have a lot of resources in the Parliamentary Information Center. How do you promote or publicize their usage?
We spoke about that. Our intranet, our interface, the digital displays that will be all over Parliament. They'll be running the whole day on what is available. We will push some of the information to your cell phones on what activities are going on at the library. We're going to have, it's already there, Facebook for the library, to talk to you and you talk to us. We are currently investigating a system, a tracking system of information queries where we can go back to the user if he had a complaint or compliment our services. So there are various ways, but I must admit we have not developed a strategy. The idea is there, but digital displays are currently in our minds to use it for a marketing strategy.
Are there any other questions? Comments? There's a hand there.
In the rebranding strategy, I wanted to know the impact it had on the existing staff. Did they all conform to the new expectations and the requisite qualifications and the skills and tooling, or you had to let go of some excess baggage of staff and recruit the .com? Thank you.
You are forcing me to say things I would normally say it in public. This whole project is driving us crazy. Everybody has an anxiety. Will I lose my job? I'm doing new things. You don't pay me for these new things. We are delivering new services. They have not been acknowledged. Hence, we have this sub-project to look at human resource issues, the structure, new skills that are required. That is being addressed in that particular sub-project. But you're quite right, it is bringing anxieties in terms of staff, security, skills, lack of confidence, what to expect tomorrow. I gave that background deliberately that overview. We are from an environment where we used to sit behind the desk and wait for an MP to come and ask a question. Don't worry what's going on until they come there. Now we are trying to be more proactive, which was not there before. But if you are proactive, what services, what products are you bringing forward to the member? Are they relevant? We were not used in approaching members and talk to them. Now, we are forced to go and ask them, what information would you normally use? How can I serve you with this information? What tools can I use for you to disseminate this information? That also brings in anxiety. Some people have refused. I won't talk to members. So I understand your question, but we were pretty aware of those anxieties long before the project started. Hence, we came up with this sub-project. Thanks.
I see there's one more hand there. Any other hand? Okay, over to you then.
Thank you. My name is Chama Mfula. I'm from National Assembly of Zambia. Albert, I think you've given us the perspective of your work in the library, or you've rebranded and renamed the library. But I think the other aspect is also important. The implications on management and other colleagues in other departments as well, because you're rebranding and the perception of the library. How has been your interaction with your other colleagues in other departments, because you need the support from all the other colleagues in the other information sector for you to actually really succeed in disseminating all the information and being able to give a good quality service. So how's been the perception from your other colleagues in the other departments and management as well? Thank you.
I think we've got the witnesses here. We've been receiving accolades from all over Parliament. You're doing excellent job. From all over, especially from the research department in Parliament, from certain members of Parliament, Deputy Speaker himself. He would send messages and say, I'm in the moon, the services you are providing. Members of Parliament would send messages. We've got here, I mean, she can speak to you the whole day, the head of the reference service, regarding the messages that we are receiving because of this change. We have not actually gone out to explain to Parliament that we are providing this service, we're doing this. They have already seen the change. Just before I came here this morning, I had to answer to 5 queries. I want this book on my desk electronically. I could see that you are giving free books to other people. Other people can do A, B, C, D. Why can't I get this? I mean, that shows the interest they are showing to the library, whereas before it was a quiet place. It was a gentleman's library. Now it's a vibrant place. But we've also noticed that this is very interesting. There are now very few people that are going to the library. That worries me. But we don't judge the library by the number of people going there. But if you look on the system, our systems almost crash every day because of the number of concurrent people are searching and looking at documents. That tells us the statistics Per day, if I'm correct, Rian, there are about 8,000 concurrent users on our newspapers, just per day. 8,000. Now that tells us, unlike before, those people would be flocking to the library, go and read newspapers to the library. Now they read them online. But we've got limited licenses. So the system crashes.
Thank you for those questions, colleagues. I think now we will be closing this session.